Alien man abandoned his dirty heritage, wife at my door. Now we share the same bed.
The rain over Ravis docks didn't fall in a straight line. It came in bursts and swirls, pushed by crosswinds off the harbor, slamming into the narrow alleys between the stacked tenements. Rust streaked down the sides of corrugated walls. The sound of water hitting metal was constant, a dull roar that made even footsteps disappear. Micah Reeves sat at his drafting table in a dim second-floor apartment overlooking the water. The room smelled faintly of brine, lamp oil, and damp paper. It was lined with shelves full of rolled star charts, half-complete survey maps, and annotated trade route diagrams. He had been sketching coastlines for the past 3 hours, trying to finish a commission for the Navigation Guild before the week's end. The work was methodical and quiet, the kind of work that suited him. Micah was 36, a human cartographer and archivist who had lived on the fringes of Ravis for 6 years. He wasn't here by choice at first. A mapping contract had brought him, and the steady income had kept him. His work required precision and patience, and he preferred solitude to crowds. He was careful about who he spoke to, knowing that in this part of the docks, the wrong word could travel faster than the tide. The knocking started as a dull thud. At first he thought it was something shifting in the wind, a loose shutter or an unsecured crate. Then it came again, sharper, in an uneven rhythm, as if someone was leaning their weight on his door just to stay standing. He set his pen down and wiped his ink-stained fingers on a rag. The rain had picked up again, rattling against the glass. A cold draft pushed under the doorframe even before he reached it. He slid the bolt back and pulled the door open. A gust of rain-soaked air hit him. Standing in the hallway outside, just under the dim, flickering street lamp across the alley, was a woman. Her skin was a deep violet shade, glistening with water. Her silver-white hair clung to her face and neck in tangled strands. She wore only a thin ceremonial wrap, deep purple fabric with faded silver embroidery, now ripped and plastered against her body by the rain. The hem was frayed and dragging. Her bare feet were cut, bruised, and reddened from the cold, leaving faint smears of diluted blood where she stood. Her hands were gripping a small satchel so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. The satchel looked old, its straps worn smooth, but she held it like it was the only thing she had left. At the far end of the alley, a tall Zyrene man lingered in shadow, watching them. Even in the poor light, Micah could see the arrogance in his posture. Chin lifted, hands spread as if presenting something unwanted. When he spoke, it was in Zyrene, but the words carried enough meaning in their tone for Micah to understand. Take her, human. She is of dirty heritage. Not mine anymore. The man didn't wait for a reply. He turned and disappeared into the rain without looking back. His footsteps faded quickly, swallowed by the storm. Micah's eyes went back to the woman. She was standing very still, her breathing visible in the cold air. Her expression wasn't blank. It was contained. Fear was there, but locked down like she'd had years of practice in not showing it. The alley's light caught in her pale blue eyes, and for a moment, he saw the exhaustion behind them. She looked one bad minute away from collapsing. Micah knew exactly what had just happened. In Zyrene culture, being labeled dirty heritage meant being marked as impure, an outcast unworthy of family ties or clan protection. The insult wasn't just social. It was a public erasure of a person's worth. If her husband had brought her into the human quarter to abandon her, it meant he wanted her gone from Zyrene's sight entirely. A human neighbor wouldn't challenge it. The local authorities wouldn't care. Micah wasn't looking for complications. He kept to himself, did his work, and avoided entanglements in the politics of other species. Bringing her in would be noticed. It would be whispered about. But she wasn't going to last an hour in the open like this. Not in the cold, not in those clothes, not with bare feet on rain-slick cobblestone. He stepped back from a doorway. "Come in," he said. "Watch your step." For a moment, she didn't move. Her throat worked as if she wanted to speak, but nothing came. She finally stepped forward, careful and measured, avoiding the spots where the floorboards dipped. She moved with the controlled grace of someone trained to behave in formal spaces. Even now, soaked and shivering, Micah closed the door and slid the bolt back into place. The faint warmth in the room reached them both. The yellow light from the oil lamps softened the edges of the cluttered space. "Bathroom's through there," he said, nodding toward the short hall. "Towels on the hook behind the door. I'll find you something dry." Her eyes went briefly to the hall, then back to him. "If I stand there, will you watch me?" Her voice was calm, but there was an edge under it. Not flirtation, not suspicion, just the raw habit of asking. "No," Micah said simply. "You can lock it." She nodded once and walked to the bathroom, still holding the satchel. The lock clicked a moment later. Micah went to the small dresser against the far wall and pulled out a thick shirt and a pair of soft drawstring shorts. He set them on the chair outside the bathroom along with a folded blanket. From the kitchen, he filled the kettle and set it on the burner, watching the blue flame catch. His thoughts ran practical first, whether she'd eat, if she was hurt, if she'd even stay the night. But underneath was the quiet certainty that he'd already made his choice by letting her in. The bathroom door opened. Steam spilled out, carrying the clean scent of soap. She had changed into his shirt, the hem reaching mid-thigh, sleeves rolled twice to free her hands. The shorts were hidden under the fabric. Her hair hung damp and straight down her back. She tied the sash from her satchel around her waist in a neat knot, as if to keep some piece of herself intact. The satchel itself was on the floor beside her. Micah poured tea into a mug and set it on the table. "It's hot. Careful." She wrapped her fingers around it, but didn't drink. "Nyria," she said finally. "Of the Velan house, formerly." "Micah Reeve," he said. "Cartographer. I draw maps. That's most of what I do." She glanced toward the drafting table, where a large star chart lay half-finished. Her gaze lingered on the inked lines. "You chart the drowned flats correctly. Most maps don't." "I've been there," he said. "They shift every season." She nodded once, then sat down at the table. He pushed a small plate of bread and quince paste toward her. She looked at it, but didn't reach for it. "You can stay here tonight," he said after a pause. "After that, we decide what's next. I don't barter meals for anything else. If someone told you humans work that way, they were wrong." She studied him for a long moment. "If I stay, people will talk." "They already do," he said. For the first time, something faint flickered in her expression. Not quite a smile, but a shift away from guardedness. Micah leaned back slightly, watching her take her first small bite of bread. She chewed slowly, as if testing whether her body would accept it. Her shoulders lowered a fraction, and some of the tightness in her posture eased. He didn't know yet why she had been brought here, why her husband had chosen his door, or what it would mean to let her stay. But the decision wasn't about convenience anymore. It was about the fact that she was here, wet and cold, and leaving her outside wasn't something he could live with. Outside, the rain kept falling over the harbor. Inside, the air was warm, the tea steaming, and for the first time since she arrived, Nyria's eyes weren't on the door, they were on him. The tea had gone lukewarm by the time Nyria set the mug down. She rested both hands on the table for a moment, fingers pressed flat, as if she needed the solid surface to steady herself. Micah watched the way her eyes flicked from the bread to the window to the satchel near her feet. It was the same scanning pattern he'd seen in seasoned travelers entering a strange port, a habit of assessing the exits, the valuables, the threats. She seemed calmer now, but not at ease. He noticed the small tremor in her right hand when she reached for another bite of bread, how she quickly switched to her left, as if to hide it. Micah broke the silence. "Was this the first time you've been in the human quarter?" Her eyes shifted to him, cautious. "No. I came here once, years ago, with my husband's family. They kept me in the carriage. We stopped for supplies. I was told not to speak to anyone." "Why my door?" he asked, finally giving voice to the question hanging since she arrived. She hesitated. "Because it's at the end of the lane. Because the lights were on. Because he wanted someone to see." She looked down, running her thumb over the rim of the mug. "He didn't pick you for a reason. You were just close enough. That answered part of it, but not all. And the satchel? What's in it?" Nyria's hand tightened around the strap on the floor. "One item. My mother's. It's all I have left from her. It's worth nothing to sell, but worth everything to keep." She gave him a look that warned against asking to see it again tonight. He didn't press. Instead, he stood and took her empty mug to the counter. The sound of the rain outside had softened, shifting to a steadier rhythm against the windows. When he returned, she was watching him in a way she hadn't before, not measuring him as a potential threat, but trying to decide what he wanted from her. "You live alone?" "Yes." He paused. "I work alone too. That's unusual. Humans often live in groups here. Easier to manage costs." "I prefer quiet," Micah said. Her expression shifted, but she didn't challenge it. "I had quiet once, before the marriage." She didn't elaborate, and he let the silence stretch rather than demand details. After a while, she glanced toward the small hallway again. "May I sleep now?" "You can take the bed," Micah said. "I'll use the chair by the window." She rose slowly, the shirt he'd given her falling against her legs, the sash tied neatly at her waist. She picked up the satchel and carried it with her into the bedroom. The door didn't close all the way, and Micah noticed she left it that way deliberately, a signal that she wanted a barrier, but not isolation. He settled into the long chair. The harbor's dim lights cast shifting patterns across the ceiling. His mind kept returning to her words. He wanted someone to see. It was cruel in its calculation, leaving her here not out of care, but to make her humiliation public to a stranger. An hour passed. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and the occasional groan of the wind against the shutters. Then the soft scrape of the bedroom door moving caught his attention. Nyria stepped out, the satchel still in her hand. She approached the drafting table, unfastened the flap, and removed the small pendant she had shown him earlier. She placed it on the table without a word. Micah stood, moving closer. "You're showing me again," he said, not as a question. "I'm showing you properly," she replied, "so you understand why I'm here with nothing else." She tapped the pendant. "This is the only thing I kept when they took me from my mother's home. I learned to read it before I could read books. My father called it useless decoration. My husband told me to throw it away. I didn't." Micah leaned in, examining the precise etched grid and the tide markings. "A map." Her eyes stayed on his face. "To anyone else, it's a trinket. To the Orenyi, it's an inheritance. My heritage, the one they called dirty." She took a slow breath. "I think that's why my husband wanted me gone tonight. Not just because of my blood, because I refused to hide it." Micah let that sit between them. It was more than he'd expected her to share on the first night. "You'll keep it here," he said. "No one will touch it." She studied him again, measuring his tone, then nodded. Without another word, she returned the pendant to her satchel and walked back to the bedroom. This time, when the door closed, the sound was quieter. Less like defense, more like she was finally claiming a space to rest. Micah returned to the chair, the smell of rain and warm paper filling the room. The details of the night had shifted something. She wasn't just an abandoned stranger now. She was someone carrying a piece of her history through a place that didn't want her to have it. And whether he liked it or not, that history was now under his roof. For the first time in years, he found himself wondering not how quickly someone would leave, but what might happen if they stayed. Micah woke before dawn, as he always did. Years of early harbor runs and map deliveries had trained him to rise with the first pale light. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the air heavy and cold. He could hear the distant creak of mooring ropes and the slow slap of water against the pier. He sat up in the chair, stretching the stiffness from his back, and glanced toward the bedroom door. It was closed, but the faint shadow of the chair she'd wedged against it was gone. That small change made him pause. He boiled water quietly, not wanting to wake her if she was still sleeping. As the kettle whistled softly, the bedroom door opened. Nyria stepped out, carrying the satchel, but her posture was looser than last night. The shirt he'd given her hung comfortably now, sleeves rolled neatly, the sash still in place. Her hair was dry, combed straight down her back. She stopped when she saw him watching. "You wake early," she said. "Habit," he replied, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. "Tea." She nodded and came closer. Her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. She sat at the table, placing the satchel on the chair beside her, close enough to touch. He noticed she kept it there like someone might keep a weapon within reach. Not out of mistrust toward him, but as a reflex born from losing too much too quickly. They drank in silence for a moment. Then Micah asked the question that had been hanging since the night before. "When your husband left you here, did you know it was going to happen?" She shook her head once. "I thought we were going to family gathering. He told me to wear the ceremonial wrap. In Zyrene custom, that usually means a public event, something formal. Instead, we came to the edge of the human quarter in the rain. I didn't understand until he knocked on your door and stepped away." Micah could hear the controlled tone in her voice, the way she kept it steady as if recounting a simple transaction instead of a betrayal. "And no one in your family tried to stop him?" Her mouth tightened. "They don't stop what they agree with." That answered more than she probably realized. It also made Micah think about the quiet danger of her situation, not in the form of men chasing her, but in the absence of anyone who might care if she vanished completely. She broke the silence with a sudden, almost practical question. "Will anyone come here looking for me?" Micah shook his head. "Not in any official way. Humans don't interfere in Zyrene family matters. And if your husband left you here, it's because he wants the problem to disappear, not be retrieved." Nymeria absorbed that, her fingers curling slightly around the mug. "Then I can stay a little while." She didn't say it like a request, more like a tentative test to see if he would object. He didn't. Instead, he stood and went to the drafting table. "If you're going to be here for more than a night, you might as well be comfortable. I'm working on a tidal map, dangerous shallows near the southern docks. If you really learn to read the water like you said, maybe you can help me mark the changes." Her eyes lifted, caught between surprise and calculation. "You trust me with your work? You said it yourself. Most maps are wrong," Micah said. "I'd like mine to be right." She hesitated, then rose and walked over, still keeping her satchel close. She leaned over the map, pointing to a series of faint curves near the harbor mouth. "These shoals move east after heavy storms. Your lines are from before last season. The depth markers here," she tapped lightly, "will strand a ship if they follow them now." Micah studied the area she indicated. She was correct, and more precise than he expected. He reached for a pen and made notes while she spoke, occasionally glancing at her face. There was a focus there now, a piece of the person she might have been before last night's humiliation. As the morning light strengthened through the window, he realized how much quieter her body had become. The constant scanning of the room had lessened. She was looking at the map, not the door. When they finished, Micah rolled the chart carefully. "You're good at this," he said. "My mother taught me before I married," she replied. "She said it would be useful one day." I didn't believe her. She paused, eyes flicking briefly to the satchel. Now I know why she insisted. Micah didn't ask about her mother's fate. The way Nymeria looked at the pendant the night before had already told him enough. By midday, he decided they should restock on food. "The market's only 3 streets over," he said. "I need to get bread and lamp oil. You can come with me if you want." Her reaction was careful. "The market is open. People will see us. They'll see 2 people buying supplies," he said evenly. "You can choose to walk beside me or behind me, whatever makes you feel safe." After a moment, she nodded. "I'll go, but I don't walk behind anyone anymore." They left together, the damp air outside carrying the smell of salt and yesterday's rain. Micah noticed she kept her head level as they passed others in the street. Not challenging, but not hiding either. It was a small defiance, but it felt deliberate. As they approached the market square, Nymeria slowed. Across the stalls, a pair of Zyrene women were standing by a produce vendor, their eyes fixed on her. They didn't speak, but the faint, disdainful lift of their chins was unmistakable. Nymeria's steps faltered. Micah caught the hesitation and spoke quietly. "Do you want to turn back?" "No," she said, voice low but firm. "If I turn away now, they'll think I agree with them." They moved through the market, choosing bread, tea, and a bundle of dried herbs. The stares followed them, but no one spoke. By the time they left, Nymeria's grip on the satchel strap had eased. Back at the apartment, she set the supplies on the counter and exhaled slowly. "I expected worse. They'll talk about it later," Micah said, "but they won't act. That's how this place works." Nymeria looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to believe him. Then she began arranging the bread and herbs in the cupboard, like she intended to stay for more than one night. Micah didn't comment, but in his mind, the decision was already made. She wasn't leaving yet. And he had a feeling that whatever had started between them over maps and tea was only just beginning. The afternoon settled into a muted rhythm. The market supplies were stored. The damp air outside had turned still, and the distant hum of the harbor was the only sound under the ticking of Micah's wall clock. Nymeria had moved to the window seat with a mug of tea, her satchel resting beside her. She was watching the harbor as if measuring each vessel's route, her eyes narrowing slightly when a trawler drifted too close to the shoal she had pointed out that morning. Micah stayed at the drafting table, adding her corrections to the title charts. But his mind wasn't entirely on the lines. He kept replaying her reaction in the market, the way she refused to walk behind him, the way she stared back at those Irene women without speaking. It told him more about her than any answer she'd given so far. He decided to ask a question that had been sitting at the edge of his thoughts since the night she arrived. Nymeria, you said you wore that ceremonial wrap because your husband told you to. Why do you think he chose that moment to leave you here? She didn't look away from the harbor at first. Because in Zyrene tradition, the wrap is worn at moments of importance. Weddings, clan gatherings, the birth of a child. It signals that the wearer is part of a public event. Leaving me in it made the rejection louder. Anyone who saw would understand I was being cast out from that life. Micah let that sink in. It wasn't just abandonment. It was a calculated humiliation. And you didn't fight him? Her gaze finally shifted to him. If I fought, he would have dragged me there himself. At least this way I walked. The answer was flat, but there was a hard line in her voice. He recognized it. The tone of someone who had learned that survival sometimes meant surrendering the appearance of control while keeping the real choices hidden. Later, as the sun dipped and the sky took on the gray blue of approaching night, Micah lit the lamps and started preparing a simple meal. Bread warmed on the pan, dried fish, and a pot of thick vegetable stew. Nymeria joined him at the counter without asking, her movements efficient but careful, as if she didn't want to take over his space. Do you cook often? He asked. When I had a home, she said. Then, after a pause, in my husband's house, meals were prepared by servants. But I wasn't allowed in the kitchen except to request food. My mother taught me before I married, in case I needed to care for myself. She said, if you can feed yourself, you can choose when you leave. Micah handed her the ladle. Then you stir. I'll get the bowls. They ate at the table, the lamplight soft between them. For the first time since she'd arrived, Nymeria didn't rush or pick at her food. She ate in measured, steady bites, her eyes occasionally lifting to meet his before dropping back to her bowl. Halfway through, she set her spoon down. What will people say about you, taking me in? Micah shrugged. That I'm interfering where I shouldn't. That I'm making trouble for myself. And does that bother you? Only if I start to believe them, he said. Her expression shifted in a way he couldn't quite read. Part curiosity, part something more guarded. After the meal, Nymeria moved to the window again while Micah cleared the table. Outside, the night air had brought the fog in thick across the harbor. Lamps along the docks glowed faintly, their lights scattering in a mist. She watched in silence for several minutes before speaking. In the market today, those women looking at me, she began. I thought they might speak to you, tell you not to let me stay. Why didn't they? They don't need to, Micah said from the counter. They expect you'll leave on your own. And if you don't, they expect you'll wear down and go quiet enough to disappear. Her jaw tightened. I've been disappearing my whole life. I'm tired of it. Micah turned toward her. Then don't. Stay where you can be seen. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Nymeria looked back out at the fog. That's dangerous advice here. Maybe, Micah said, but so is giving up. The room was quiet again, but the air between them felt different. A little less like two strangers sharing a roof, and a little more like two people circling the edge of an unspoken agreement. As the night deepened, Nymeria rose from the window seat and took her satchel to the bedroom. Before she closed the door, she paused. Tomorrow, will you show me more of your maps? The ones you don't give to the guild. Micah studied her for a moment. If you want to see them, You will." She gave a small nod and disappeared into the room, the door clicking softly shut. Micah sat back at the table, staring at the lamp flame. The unanswered questions were still there. About her family, about why she'd been able to keep the pendant when she'd been stripped of everything else, about whether her husband might still have some hold over her life. But for now, they could wait. Tonight, the only certainty was that she had not left, and he found he was already adjusting to the idea of her presence, and to the quiet shift in the apartment that came with it. Mike awoke to the faint creak of floorboards and the quiet rustle of paper. The room was still dim, the lamps unlit, but a thin line of early light leaked through the shutters. He sat up in a chair and found Nymeria standing at the drafting table. She wasn't rifling through his work, she was just looking. Her hands hovered over a set of rolled charts, fingers brushing the edges without untying them. "You're awake," she said without turning. "I'm a light sleeper," he replied, pushing the blanket aside. "You could have asked. I didn't want to wake you. I only wanted to see which maps you keep closest." Her eyes moved to the 3 rolls set apart from the rest. "Those are the ones you don't show the guild, aren't they?" Micah stood, walked over, and unrolled the top one. The map revealed a stretch of coastal water, drawn in sharp black ink, with certain areas left deliberately incomplete. "These are my private copies. Not for sale, not for trade. They're accurate, too accurate. The guild would sell this information to whoever pays the most. Some routes are safer when not everyone knows about them." Nymeria studied the lines. "You protect people with these." "I protect the information," he corrected. "People choose what to do with it." She glanced at him, reading the meaning behind his words. "You think it's the same for me and the pendant?" Micah didn't deny it. "It's not just a keepsake. You said your mother taught you to read it before books. She was preparing you for something." Nymeria's gaze fell to the pendant at her neck. She had begun wearing it openly now, the chain half hidden by a shirt, but the metal visible when she moved. "She wanted me to know where we came from. The Arini side of my blood. Zyrene schools taught me everything except how to be proud of that." She took a step back from the table, almost self-conscious. "When my husband learned what it was, he told me to throw it away. I refused." Micah's voice stayed level. "That's why he brought you here. Not just the heritage, the defiance." She nodded once. "Zyrene women are expected to obey for the good of the house. Disobedience is tolerated only if it can be hidden. Mine couldn't be." For a while they stood over the map in silence, the smell of paper and lamp oil between them. Micah felt the pull of questions he hadn't asked, whether she had anyone left, whether she was certain no one would come for her, but decided those would come in time if she wanted them to. By late morning, the fog outside began to lift, revealing the ships in the harbor. Nymeria helped prepare food again, moving more easily into space now. She no longer asked where things were. She simply opened the right drawer or cupboard. It struck Micah that she was starting to move as if she had a place here, not just a temporary refuge. When they sat down to eat, Nymeria broke the quiet first. "In the market yesterday, I noticed you didn't introduce me. Was that to protect me or to protect yourself?" Micah met her gaze evenly. "Both. People in this quarter like their own stories. I wasn't going to give them one to spread." Her lips pressed into a faint line, as if deciding whether to be satisfied with that answer. "You could tell them I'm a guest. You could also tell them I'm your companion. That last one would change how they treat you," Micah said, "and not for the better." A flicker of something, amusement, maybe, crossed her face. "So I remain unnamed." "For now," he said. The rest of the day passed in a quiet routine. Him charting, her sorting old notes into labeled bundles, both of them sharing small observations about the work. It wasn't comfortable in the easy sense, but it was steady. The air between them had shifted from guarded to measured, the kind of distance that could close without warning. That night, as Micah doused the lamps, Nymeria lingered by the window, looking out at the dark water. "If I help you with the maps," she said, "if I work with you, would that make me harder to get rid of?" Micah paused in the doorway to the bedroom. "You're already hard to get rid of." Her head turned slightly at that, but she didn't answer. She pulled the curtain closed, then crossed the room with the pendant catching the last glint of lamplight before it went dark. The next morning, the weather broke. Sunlight spilled across the harbor, throwing sharp reflections off the water and making the rusted edges of the docks look almost polished. It was the first clear day in over a week, and the streets came alive earlier than usual. Carts creaked over the cobblestones, vendors shouted prices for their fresh stock, and the smell of frying bread drifted through the open shutters. Micah was sorting through a stack of weathered charts when Nymeria stepped out of the bedroom. She was still wearing a shirt, but today she had tied the sash more loosely, letting it fall against her hip instead of cinching her waist tightly. Her hair was combed back, drying in the sunlight that fell across the table. The pendant rested openly at her collarbone. "Where are you going?" Micah asked, noticing the satchel in her hand. "The market again," she said. "I want to choose my own food this time." "You'll draw attention," he warned. "I'm already a subject for whispers," she replied without hesitation. "The only choice I have is whether to be seen buying my own bread or hiding while you buy it for me." Micah thought about that for a moment. She wasn't wrong. "I'll come with you," he said finally. The walk to the market was busier than their last visit. Sunlight revealed more faces, and more eyes followed them as they moved between stalls. The human merchants greeted Micah with nods, their glances toward Nymeria lingering just long enough to register curiosity without politeness. The Zyrene sellers said nothing at all, their expressions a mix of indifference and quiet judgment. At one vegetable stall, the vendor, an older human woman with a lined face and sharp eyes, looked from Micah to Nymeria and back again. "New help?" she asked. "She's with me," Micah said flatly. The woman's eyebrows lifted a fraction, but she didn't push further. Nymeria, however, caught the undertone. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice even when she asked for a bundle of green herbs. As they moved on, she leaned closer to Micah. "With me," she repeated quietly. "Not my friend or my guest. Just with me." "That's enough for now," he said, eyes scanning the crowd. Too much explanation only gives them more to talk about. Halfway through the market, they passed two Zyrene men standing beside a stack of fishing crates. One of them murmured something under his breath in their own language. Micah caught only a few words, but the mocking tone made the meaning clear. Nymeria's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't break her stride. By the time they reached the far end of the stalls, she stopped abruptly, turning to face him. "Do you hear it?" "Hear what?" "The way they say nothing," she said. "It's worse than open insult. At least when someone spits on you, they acknowledge you exist." This, she gestured toward the square, her voice low but sharp. This is a way of erasing people without having to touch them. Micah studied her face, the controlled anger, the quickened breath. He realized this was the first time she'd spoken openly about how it felt to walk through this place. "Then we don't give them the satisfaction," he said. "We keep going until they have to look at us." They returned to the apartment, carrying their purchases in silence. Once inside, Nymeria set the bags down and went straight to the window, staring out at the harbor as if she needed the open view to breathe again. "Today was harder than yesterday," she admitted after a long pause. "I thought I could ignore them, but every glance, every silence, it stacks up." Micah leaned against the counter. "You've been here 2 days. They'll keep testing you. The only control you have is how you respond." She turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "And you? Does it bother you that they'll think you've taken in someone like me?" "Let them think whatever they want," he said. "Their opinions don't keep me alive. My maps do." That earned him a faint smile, the kind that wasn't about amusement, but about recognition. Later, as they prepared a meal together, Micah noticed she was moving more comfortably in his space, brushing past him at the counter without hesitation, reaching over him to take a bowl from the shelf. The quiet between them had shifted again, now threaded with a subtle awareness of each other's presence. After dinner, Nymeria picked up one of his private maps and studied it by the lamplight. "I've been thinking," she said, "if we work together, you could have the most accurate charts on this coast. But it would mean letting people know I'm part of it. My name would be attached. That would make you more visible," Micah said. "It would also make it harder for them to pretend I'm gone," she replied. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her standing there in the warm light, her pendant catching the glow, and understood that she wasn't asking for permission. She was telling him her plan. When she finally met his eyes, he said, "Then we do it, on our terms." For the first time, Nyeria's expression fully softened, not into relief, but into something steadier, the beginning of trust. The following week settled into a quiet but deliberate routine. Every morning, Micah cleared space on the drafting table for Nyeria, rolling out 2 or 3 charts at a time. She worked with a steady precision, marking currents, shoals, and shifting sandbars with the fine-tipped pens he trusted only for important work. Her handwriting was careful but distinct from his small, measured script that hinted at formal training. By the 3rd day, Micah no longer had to check her annotations. She was always correct and often spotted changes he would have missed. The trust in her skill grew silently between them, but it wasn't just professional. There was an unspoken understanding forming in the way they worked side by side. No wasted movements, no unnecessary words, and the occasional exchange of a glance when something on the chart demanded focus. Outside the apartment, the whispers had shifted. The merchants in the market still looked at them, but the stares carried something different now. Not just judgment, but curiosity. A human cartographer working openly with a Zyrenia woman was unusual enough to notice. The fact that she appeared daily with him, carrying charts or supplies, made ignoring her impossible. One evening, Micah returned from a short trip to the docks to find Nyeria at the window. She wasn't looking at the harbor. She was watching the street below. "They were outside again," she said without turning. "Who?" "The same 2 women from the market. They didn't speak, just stood there long enough for me to notice, then walked away." Micah crossed the room, stood beside her, and scanned the street. Empty now, just the glow of lanterns and the occasional passerby. "They want you to know they're watching," he said. Nyeria finally looked at him. "It doesn't frighten me. It's just tiring." Micah considered his words carefully. "If you're going to stay here and work with me, you need to decide how much of yourself you're willing to show them." "I've decided," she said quietly, "but I need to know something before I take the next step." He waited. "Why did you let me in that night?" she asked. "You didn't know me. You didn't know what trouble I might bring. Why not close the door?" The answer came without hesitation. "Because I couldn't walk past someone in that state and pretend I didn't see it. And because I'm not afraid of what people here think they know about me." Her eyes stayed on his for a long moment, searching for any sign of performance. Finding none, she nodded once, as if confirming something for herself. That night, the harbor wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Power flickered twice before cutting out entirely. The lamps went dark, and the apartment sank into a dim half-light from the street outside. Micah lit a small oil lamp and set it on the table. "It's only the district grid. They'll have it running again by morning." Nyeria stepped closer to the warm circle of light. Without the steady hum of the heater or the glow of the lamps, the space between them felt sharper. She was still in a shirt, sleeves rolled, sash tied loosely. Her hair, unbound for the night, fell forward when she leaned over the table to look at the map he'd left out. "You know," she said, tracing a finger along the inked coastline, "when I first offered myself to you that night, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I thought it was the only way you'd let me stay." Micah's voice stayed low. "And now?" She looked up, her face lit by the small flame. "Now I know I don't have to, which means if I did, it would be because I chose to." The silence after that was heavier than the air outside. Micah didn't move toward her, but he didn't step back either. He let her decide. Nyeria reached out, resting her hand on his forearm. A slow, deliberate touch, not seeking permission, but giving it. He felt the faint tremor in her fingers, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. She didn't speak again. Instead, she turned and walked toward the bedroom, leaving the door half open behind her. Micah stood there for a few breaths, the sound of the harbor faint through the walls, the oil lamp casting its narrow glow across the maps. Then he followed. Inside the room, the light from the lamp barely reached the bed. She was sitting at the edge, the pendant resting against her collarbone, her posture calm but unguarded for the first time since he'd met her. When he sat beside her, she didn't flinch. Her hand found his again, fingers threading through, holding, not pulling. The decision had already been made, not by words, but by every day they'd spent working, walking the market, and refusing to be erased. The sun rose into a pale blue sky, the harbor quiet except for the occasional call of gulls. The district grid had come back on in the early hours, and a soft hum from the heater filled the apartment again. Micah woke to find Nyria already up, standing by the window with a mug of tea in her hands. She had opened the shutters, letting in the salt-heavy breeze. She didn't turn when she heard him move. "It's a clear day," she said. "The water looks calm." Micah stepped beside her, taking in the view. From this height, the market square was visible. Small clusters of people were already forming around the first stalls to open. Some of the same merchants who had once stared at them now glanced up at the window, their expressions unreadable. "Do you want to go out today?" Micah asked. "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "But not just to the market. I want people to see us working together." She turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking about what we talked about, attaching my name to the maps. If we do it openly. No hiding." Micah searched her expression for any sign of uncertainty. There was none. "Then we'll need to make it official." They spent the next hour preparing. Micah pulled a large, freshly completed chart from the table, a full map of the southern shoals with updated tide markers they had both worked on. Nyria signed her name in the lower corner, the sharp strokes of her handwriting standing out against his broader script. Seeing both names together shifted something in the air. It was more than a map now. It was a declaration. Carrying the chart between them, they left for the guild hall in the central district. The walk drew more stares than usual. Some people paused their conversations, following them with their eyes until they turned the next corner. Nyria kept her head level, her pace steady, the pendant catching sunlight with each step. The guild hall was busy, clerks moving between desks, members reviewing charts, the air thick with the smell of ink and salt. Micah approached the main desk, laying the map out flat. "Updated shoals," he said. "Verified changes after the last storms. And this is Nyria. She's my partner in the work." The clerk, a wiry man with a perpetually furrowed brow, looked from Micah to Nyria, then down at the map. "Your partner?" "That's right," Micah said evenly. The man studied the chart, noting the dual signatures. He hesitated, then nodded once. "We'll record it as submitted by both of you." Nyria said nothing during the exchange, but when they stepped outside, her hand brushed Micah's arm in a quiet acknowledgement. The walk back to the apartment felt different. The same Zyrene women who had watched her before were in the square again. But this time, their eyes lingered longer, not with the sharp edge of dismissal, but with the weight of recognition. No words were exchanged, and that was enough. That evening, they sat by the open window with the harbor lights reflecting off the water. The air between them was no longer tentative. Nyria rested her satchel on the table, opened it, and took out the pendant. Without ceremony, she placed it in Micah's hand. "It's still mine," she said, "but I want you to know it's safe here. With you." He closed his fingers around it, feeling the cool weight of the metal, the precise etchings of the hidden map. "Then it stays here." She smiled, small, steady, real. It wasn't the guarded half-smile she'd worn in the market, nor the fleeting one from their first night. This one stayed. Later, when the lamps were dimmed and the sound of the tide filled the quiet, Nyria moved closer to him without hesitation, leaning into the space that had once been a careful distance. Her hand found his, not as a transaction, not as repayment, but as choice. They didn't speak much after that. They didn't need to. In the days that followed, the market still whispered, the guilds still weighed their work, and the harbor still shifted with the tide. But the difference was clear. Nyria was no longer an unnamed woman standing in someone else's doorway. She was here, present, working, her name written into the maps that would outlast the gossip. Micah knew the stares wouldn't stop, but he also knew they no longer mattered. By the end of the week, the apartment felt less like his and more like theirs. A place marked by 2 mugs on the table, 2 sets of notes on the drafting desk, and the quiet certainty that the choice they'd made that night in the half-light was one neither of them would undo. And in the soft lamplight, with the harbor wind curling through the open window, they both knew. The whispers outside had finally lost their power. Several weeks had passed since Nyeria's name had been inked beside Micah's on the guild's ledgers. Life had fallen into a rhythm that neither of them had dared to imagine on that first night. A rhythm shaped by shared work, quiet mornings, and the knowledge that neither of them was living in someone else's shadow anymore. The market had grown, used to seeing them together. Some still looked too long, some still whispered, but others nodded in acknowledgement. The guild had accepted 3 more maps under both their names, each one carrying the blend of Micah's precision and Nyeria's instinct for water. Even the clerks who once looked at her with polite disinterest now asked for her confirmation on title changes. It was a clear day, the kind where the air felt washed clean and the harbor smelled of salt and sun-warmed wood. Micah had finished his morning work early, and Nyeria had returned from the market with fresh bread and a bundle of dried fruit. They ate by the open window, their chairs pulled close together, the sun spilling across the table. "You remember," Nyeria said, tearing a piece of bread, "the night I stood here and asked if you'd keep me for more than one night?" "I do," Micah said. "I thought you'd send me away within the week. I was ready for it." She gave a small, wry smile. "Now I can't imagine this apartment without my maps on your table." "There are maps," Micah corrected. Her smile deepened, and for a moment they sat in comfortable silence, the kind that needed no filling. By late afternoon, the harbor had quieted. Most of the ships were out, and the streets below had thinned. The apartment felt insulated from the rest of the district, their own small place, the air still warm from the sun. Nyeria was standing by the table, sorting a stack of old notes when Micah came up behind her. He didn't say anything, just rested a hand lightly at her waist. She didn't flinch, not even a flicker of hesitation. Instead, she set the papers down, turned in his arms, and looked at him in a way that said the choice was hers and hers alone. The days of distance, of waiting to see if the other would close the gap, were gone. They had built something steady enough to stand on, and now, the closeness between them didn't carry the weight of fear or obligation. Micah kissed her first, slow, deliberate, giving her the space to stop him if she wished. She didn't. Her hands came up to his shoulders, fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. The kiss deepened gradually, the kind that was less about urgency and more about confirmation, of trust, of wanting, of everything they hadn't rushed before. When they finally parted, she didn't step away. "Close the shutters," she said softly. He did, the lamplight filling the room in place of the sun. The rest of the world, the harbor, the street, the market, stayed outside. Inside, there was only the two of them, moving together without the hesitation of strangers or the guardedness of people expecting to be hurt. Every gesture felt deliberate. The way her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the way his hands slid to the small of her back, pulling her closer, the way she leaned into him as if she had finally stopped bracing for rejection. Clothes loosened, the air between them warm from their nearness, the scent of her skin mixing with the faint salt still clinging to his shirt. They didn't rush. There was no debt to settle, no bargain to uphold, only the slow unfolding of something they had built day by day, chart by chart, look by look. When they finally came together, it was with the unspoken understanding that this was not the start of something uncertain, but the continuation of what they had already chosen. Later, they lay in the quiet, the lamplight casting soft shadows across the walls. Nyeria rested her head against his shoulder, her breathing slow and steady. "Do you still think I might leave?" she asked. Micah turned his head to look at her. "No, and I don't think you do either." She smiled, not the guarded half-smile of their first days, but one that stayed steady and sure. The tide shifted outside, the harbor settling into its nighttime rhythm. The maps on the table would wait until morning. Tonight, there was nothing to mark, nothing to correct, nothing to measure, but the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. And this time, there would be no more doors closing between them.